This is a presentation of National Streaming Sports. Over 20 podcasters, 70 weekly shows, and a 3.4-star rating on Roku TV. Check out nessp.info for direct links and deals on the site BetUs for 125% off your first three deposits in NFL and college odds for upcoming games, Major League Baseball and NBA futures, and boxing wagers. Also, check out Fanatics, sportswear for your favorite teams, and also network merchandise, retro, Northeast Streaming Sports, National Streaming Sports, Big Football, and the Mac and Jack Sports Show t-shirts. Coffee mugs are coming soon. Check it out. Sports Memories with Mac, Jack, and Doc on Northeast Streaming Sports. Every Saturday at 8 a.m. And let me bring us up here as I'm making a couple changes as my co-host, the great sports writer, has pointed out to me I made another mistake on the banners. But anyway, here we are with the Mac and Jack and James Sports Memory Show. Is James is filling in for Doc, and we're gonna have James on here a lot more because of the great job he's been doing here in on National Streaming Sports Memories. Let me talk a little bit about BetUs, and then Jack's going to bring us up to date with a sad story. BetUs, guys, college football season is here. Football season is here. There's a QR code right there. Brings you directly to BetUs, and Fanatics also on our nessp.info website. We got a lot of new things going on there. We got Lakers shirts. We got Giants retro shirts from 100 years ago. We also got Boston Celtics shirts on there. So check it out. Direct links right there giving you great deals. Jack is going to update us with a little sad news before we start here.
Yeah, whether you're a hockey fan or not, I mean, you take it to heart, whether you're a sports fan or not, what happened to Johnny Gaudreau, the hockey player from the Columbus Blue Jackets, 7-time All-Star, one of the best players in the NHL, and his brother Matthew. They're from the state of New Jersey. They were driving their bicycles on the service road, and a driver, apparently a drunk driver by all reports, went into the service lane that he wasn't supposed to go into, where they were riding their bicycles, and struck them both. And both brothers were killed. And to compound it, they went down the day before their sister's wedding. Imagine that, the day before their sister's wedding. And it's an unspeakable tragedy when you think, they were both married. Johnny Gaudreau had a couple of kids, and, young couple, and the parents to lose 2 sons the day before the wedding, on top of it as well. It's just a devastating tragedy. I mean, it pains me to talk about it. The words are hard for me to come, for it to come out. I mean, I didn't feel a bond to this athlete beforehand because I'm not a big hockey fan. But you hear news like this, and, it just doesn't get any worse. I mean, tragedies happen, and I don't want to put tragedies on certain levels that say some are greater than others, because all of them, obviously terrible. But it's beyond, if there's a word that's beyond devastating, this is it. And my, hearts go out not only to the deceased, brothers, but to the, family members, what they have to, go through. And this isn't sports, this is life. And it hurts so much, to think about it, just let alone talk about it. And you just hope the family members moving forward could have the most possible comfort that they can under these terrible circumstances.
Yeah, and we agree, of course. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the families too. I mean, I can't imagine, having two sons killed at once, or two brothers, or two uncles, and you go on and on and on, and with that close to something that's supposed to be a nice thing, and a life-changing thing, and it's just totally opposite. So.
And let me just make one remark: if there's any of our viewers who drive a little too quick, a little too recklessly, aren't as careful as they should be, don't obey the speed limits, what I'm saying is probably going to fall on deaf ears, but, try to remember that things like this could potentially happen with you behind the wheel. So just try to be conscious to be as safe as you can on the roads.
I agree. So let's start with the show. We go back and we check in the past to see why we are what we are now, right? Without the past, you don't have the present. And, there's certain players, there's certain events, there's certain teams, there's certain people that influence our sports today. And one of them, James, is the great Carl Yastrzemski, left fielder for the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah. Looking this guy up, man. Well, I did a lot of extensive research, and Jack, you'll be glad to know I couldn't find anything about harmonicas or any other instruments for that matter. So you don't have to worry about that. But what I did find out about this guy, Carl Yastrzemski, was a great baseball player for the Red Sox. 18 seasons, he had 18 All-Stars, and he played a lot of great baseball for them. He ended up retiring as a Red Sox, and went to their Hall of Fame to retire his number 8, and he also went to the Hall of Fame in '89. But let's go back to the beginning. Carl Yastrzemski played baseball when he was young, but unlike some of the other great legends that you, Jack, Mac, that you've given me, like the DiMaggio brothers and Stan the Man, those guys' fathers were opposed to them playing baseball, but this guy, his father, played baseball, and he encouraged his son to play. And through the words of Carl himself, he said, had he not wanted to keep the farm intact, a potato farm, he would have wanted to play himself. But Carl started out in high school. In his senior year, he averaged, I think his hitting was about over 600. And so the Yankees already were looking at this guy. They were already looking at him. And his father said no. He said, unless they're going to pay for you to go to school, which he wanted him to go to Notre Dame, you're going to go to school. And so they obviously wouldn't pay for that. And he went to Notre Dame on a basketball scholarship and played baseball, but he focused mostly on baseball. And he was doing so well, here come the Red Sox looking at him. So around 59 is when he started in the minor leagues for a couple. He had a couple stints in minor league for the Red Sox, and then in 61 is when he got called up, and that's where it began, man. This guy's a hitter, man, and he just never stopped. In the beginning, because of the stress, I think he said, of having to live up to someone like Ted Williams, it was a little bit tough in the beginning to be able to hit. But man, Ted came in and talked to him and said, just don't worry about any other technique, just go out and play ball. And that's when he got his mojo, and then he just kept going. And let's go all the way to 67. Arguably his finest season of his whole career, his 18 seasons. This is the year that he got the Triple Crown. And mind you, once he got the Triple Crown, there hadn't been a Triple Crown up until 2012 with Miguel Cabrera. There hadn't been one in between that. I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, that's what it says. And I was impressed. Wow, just what it takes to get that. He had 44 homers. He had a 326 batting average, and he had 121 RBIs. And these guys were ninth. I think they were in ninth place at the time towards the end. And he got them all the way to within one.
The year before they were ninth place team this season in 1966. In 1967 they went to first. They won the ninth place during the year 67. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, well, they ended up getting to the World Series, and unfortunately, they won 7 games, and they didn't win. They didn't win the World Series against the St. Louis Cardinals. And so, thank you, Jack, for correcting me. I appreciate that. It was. I think that was a tough one for him because obviously, again, this is a guy that was what I understand is a perfectionist, and the Red Sox hadn't been to a World Series since 19 or hadn't won one since 1918, and they hadn't won a pennant since 1946. So you can see that they were clamoring to try to get this done, but they could. I mean, 7 games is tough to lose in 7 games, 4-3, and then at 39, I believe in 75, he did the same thing, and that team wasn't really that good. It was just really him, and they went up against the Reds and lost in 7 again. And it was really, really tough on him. But I mean, to say that takes away from his career really doesn't. I mean, because this guy was just a great, hitter. 18 seasons, 18 All-Stars, in 3,308 games, he had 3,419 hits. He had 644 doubles, 400. It was the first player, mind you, to get 3,400 homers. He was the first player to ever do that. And he ended up with 452 homers, a 285 batting average over that time. And he had 1,844 RBIs. So it's just an impressive guy. I mean, most of the records for the Red Sox are his. He's only third in home runs behind Ted Williams and David Ortiz. So I mean, this is just I was just tremendously impressed with this guy and what he was able to accomplish. And he was just a great hitter. You guys can tell me more because obviously you were able to view this guy. I watched a lot of footage too. He was an impressive guy, but that's what I got on him, man. It's just great overall player and legend. I mean, again, 3,000 hits. He's one of 30 plus, I believe. 3,000 hits.
Yeah.
Jack, you got the look in your
James,
face.
I just got one thing kind of correct. In 1975, the Red Sox had a hell of a team.
They did.
That went up against the Reds. A tremendous team.
Yes.
A championship-worthy team, a team that was better than other teams that have won World Series. But they went up against the Reds, and they lost by 1 run in the 7th game of the series. They had a 3-0 lead, at the end of 6 innings, and then the Reds scored. Tony Perez hit a 2-run homer to cut it to 3-2. Then they made it 3-up. Then the Reds scored a run in the 9th, 1-4-3. But they did really have a heck of a team in 75 with Carlton Fisk, Jim Rice. In 67, I remember that Red Sox they had a nickname, the Impossible Dream Team, because of that. And you gave us a lot of great stuff. I didn't realize the Yankees' interest in Carl Yastrzemski. Now I really feel terrible about it. What a difference maker he would have made for my Yankee team. I wasn't aware of that. So I'm not sure whether I'm happy you enlightened me to that or not. But there were only 10 teams in the American League, 10 teams in the National League, and the only one that got in the playoffs was the first place team. And the Red Sox got there on the last day of the season. I think the Twins and the White Sox were in it, and they squeaked through. And in the World Series, they were down 3-1 to the Cardinals, and then they won games 5 and 6. But their problem was Bob Gibson, the great St. Louis pitcher they were going up against. Yes. And by game 7, the Red Sox ace Jim Lomberg, his arm was tired. But Carl Yastrzemski was one of the best defensive left fielders I've ever seen, one of the best. And in an opening game of the 1967 season when he won the Triple Crown, the Red Sox are playing the Yankees at Yankee Stadium, and the Red Sox had on the mound this rookie Bill Rohr. And he has a no-hitter with 2 outs in the 9th inning, but with 1 out in the 9th inning, or no outs. I forgot, but it was the 9th inning. Carl Yastrzemski makes the most amazing catch to keep the no-hitter going. Amazing catch. He stretched out, but unfortunately, Elston Howard of the Yankees gets a base hit with 2 outs in the 9th inning to spoil the no-hitter. Ironically, Elston Howard, before the year was out, would be traded to the Red Sox, the team where he broke up the no-hitter. But you're right, the stuff you're saying about Carl Yastrzemski. And when you think of his longevity, you mentioned 1967 where he had that amazing Triple Crown season. He was there 1978 when the Yankees played the Red Sox the 1-game playoff. Think about longevity. He made the last out of the game with runners in scoring position, but he did hit a home run early in the game for the Red Sox. I mean, Carl Yastrzemski, I don't think his name has been lost in time. I don't know what Mac thinks. We know Ted Williams as being a great Red Sox icon. I think Yastrzemski is thought of in Red Sox Nation the way Don Mattingly is thought of in Yankee Nation. He played in a different era. And even though Mattingly wasn't there for the Yankee championship teams, he kind of defined a Yankee era. And I think Yastrzemski kind of in a way defines the Red Sox era, the non-championship era.
I think, Jack, that Ted Williams is above Don Mattingly, right? He went to 2 World Series, Triple Crown winner. I mean, Yastrzemski was the face of the Red Sox. And I know Mattingly was too, but because of the longevity, because of the World Series, I think up here, Yastrzemski's thought about very well. It's Mattingly, the Yankees, Red Sox, but maybe on California, maybe down south, he's not mentioned amongst the greatest. And, his batting average was only 285. He only hit 400 and something home runs, but he injured his shoulder. He was playing through injury. I mean, when he came up to bat, his bat was up like this. It was a weird batting style, right? That bat was straight up over his head. And I used to try to copy it. There was, as a kid, you try to copy. I used to copy Roy White's stance. I used to copy Carl Yastrzemski's stance. And his bat, and he got so much torque on that ball coming from here. And you talked about Ted Williams, just do your own thing. That was his own thing. And when he hurt his shoulder, he had to bring it down so that he could still make good contact with the ball. So that injury is really what prevented him from hitting more home runs. As Jack said, incredible. The Green Monster, for people that have never, ever seen the Green Monster, which I don't think there are too many that have it.
Left field wall at Fenway Park.
Yeah, I did read about that.
Right. It's hard to play that wall. I mean, if you don't play there regularly, the Yankees, Roy White and players that have played there years understand it a little bit better. But Yastrzemski knew that like the back of his head. I mean, he knew when the ball was going out, when it wasn't going out, where to be, where to get the ball, where to cut it off. And he cut runners down, and it looked like a double. But Yaz knew every little crick and cranny. I mean, they got the little squares out there. There's a door out there. There's all kinds of crazy stuff out there. But he knew how to play that wall, which made him even a better outfielder, especially in Fenway Park. And for the Red Sox, even when they went up against in the World Series against the Cardinals, Yastrzemski batted over 300, had a few 3 home runs and some RBIs. I mean, he played a great game. So Yastrzemski was, Carlton Fisk, one of the best catchers in Major League Baseball. You could call him arguably the best in baseball history.
No, Carlton Fisk, you can't call him the best.
I could debate that with you all day. I could put him against Johnny Bench.
Everyone knows he wasn't as good as Johnny
We've had this debate. We've had this debate before. Carlton Fisk is right up alongside that guy and right up against the greatest catchers of all time. But anyway, I just
you
feel that
you could call him the greatest. If you want to say
I said you could argue that he's the greatest, Jack. I could any day. We'll do it one time, and we'll put the stats up there and how many years he played, and we'll debate it because I know we did it before, and he's right there. But anyway, Bill Lee
was speaking into what you both saying about him being defensively. I did forget to mention that he's a 7-time Golden Glove winner recipient.
Great player. But as Jack said, that World Series team that battled the Yankees, I mean, you knew in the American League back then in the 70s that either the Yankees were going to the World Series or the Red Sox were. That's how powerful those two teams were. You had Louis Tiant, Bill Lee. You had Butch Hobson III. You had Jerry.
Well, not in the that's the second half of the 70s.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the 70s. I'm talking about the
second
70s.
half of the 1970s.
I'm
In
talking about the 70s,
1970,
Jack. 70, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the 60s. I'm talking about the 75.
the first half of the 1970s neither got there until 1975.
Okay, whatever. That's the halfway. That's halfway point. That's the halfway point, Jack. You're always trying to pluck hairs with me. I don't know why.
Was the Athletics.
I don't know why you always try to pluck hairs with me. You know what I'm talking about. People know what I'm talking about. 75,
no, they don't. They'll think throughout the 70s.
75. Well, if they research the 70s, you're going to see the Boston Red Sox.
I'm telling you. 75.
Oh, okay. 75, Jack. 75, 76, 77. Those were the two best teams in the major league. Easily.
Right, from 75 through 78. Yeah.
Thank you. So you had Butch, before I was interrupted. You had Butch Hobson at third. You had Rick Burleson at the Rooster was at shortstop. You had Jerry Remy at second. You had Carl Yastrzemski was in left field. At one time, you had Fred Lynn in center field. I know all the players. So, whatever. But the point is, James, they had a tremendous team in the 70s and 75 and beyond.
Yeah.
They had a tremendous team. So you knew if the Yankees weren't going to the Red Sox were. And that's just the way it was. And we ended up getting the better of it later on, 76, 77, 78. So, but Carl Yastrzemski, unbelievable ball player. And like I say, I don't know how many people in the South or the North or the Western of the United States know the name. They probably know the name. But to watch that guy play, unbelievable ball player. And he actually moved to first base later on in his years because of
designated hitter, yes.
Yeah, so that's Carl Yastrzemski, a great ball player. Jackie got George Foreman. I won't split hairs with you. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't splitting hairs, Mac. You said throughout the 70s and that in the first half of the 70s, neither were there till 75.
Yeah, you're right.
Pointed
You're
out.
right.
Yeah.
Isn't 75 in the middle?
75 in the middle, the second half of the 70s, you could say. Okay, we'll ignore 1979.
Go ahead, my friend. Go ahead.
Big George Foreman. I mean, his story's been told over and over again, basically, but you never get tired of really rehashing it completely. George Foreman, if I'm going to go back to when he started boxing, he joined a job cause because he was a floundering youth, got into trouble as a youth, lived in Houston, Texas. The job cause, helped him out a great deal. He met a coach, Doc Brodus. He got interested in boxing. And 1 year after getting interested in boxing, he found himself in the Olympics. Imagine that. The heavyweight pickings weren't too great for the United States amongst the amateurs at the time. He was such a talent and so overpowering. He, as a novice, basically, he won the gold medal in the Olympics. And there's a little controversy going on because that was the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City, where the track athletes, John Carlos and Tommy Smith, held up a black glove in what was said to be a black power salute, but it was really a protest over how the conditions were in the United States. Whether they should have done it or not, people were debating at the time. And now, with revisionist history, people could still debate it, whether an athlete should be allowed to make a statement when they're representing a country. But things were so bad, for the black man in 1968, especially down south, that we have a little more tolerance for their protests now than people had at the time. That's always open for debate. But George Foreman waved an American flag after that. When he won the gold medal, he paraded around the ring. Now, Foreman wasn't trying to make a statement over what Carlos and Smith did. He wasn't protesting them at all. He was just proud because the country gave him an opportunity, and it was an innocent thing by Foreman. But there was some backlash, both positive and negative, those who were so proud of him and those who were mad at him for what he did. But in any event, he turned pro the following year, and let's forget about, any goodwill he he may have gotten. The crowd booed him out of the ring at Madison Square Garden, June 23rd, 1969. It was underneath the Joe Frazier, Jerry Quarry main event. He blew out this fighter, Don Waldham, in 3 rounds, totally dominated. But the crowd looked at him as being a bully because he was so overpowering the way he knocked guys out. The perception that he was a bully. And listen, the first live professional boxing show I ever went to when I was a kid was August 18th, 1969. George Foreman in his 4th pro fight against Chuck Wepner in the main event, an 8-round fight. Wepner was called a Bayonne bleeder, so of course Foreman stops him on cuts in 3 rounds. And look what became of the 2 guys afterwards. Foreman, we'll talk about what he went on to become, but 6 years later, Wepner challenges Muhammad Ali for the world heavyweight title, and sitting in the crowd was a young actor named Sylvester Stallone. He was so inspired by Wepner's stand, he went home and wrote a screenplay based large part on Wepner's performance called Rocky. Okay? And, and people feel basically, and it's really obvious to a large degree that Rocky was, Wepner was the inspiration for Rocky. Mm-hmm. And imagine had Wepner not fought, we may have never seen the Rocky movies. And wow, those Rocky movies are like a part of American culture, it feels like. So Foreman, after that, he was moved along slowly after the Wepner fight to an extent, or he wasn't fighting name opponents. And then he went up against Joe Frazier in Kingston, Jamaica, January 22nd, 1973. Frazier had beaten Ali a couple of years before. He was perceived as a big favorite because Foreman hadn't fought anyone. Foreman turned in one of the great performances of all time, knocking Frazier down 6 times and stopping him in 2 rounds. It wasn't quite the same Frazier that beat Ali. He lost his edge. But I got a chance to interview Frazier a lot of years later, hang out with him at the News One studio in New York. And I asked him, what would have happened to you of the first Ali fight against the Foreman who beat you in Jamaica? At first, he didn't answer the question, but I kind of persisted a little. And he said, I don't think it would have made any difference. And I said, was it a question of styles? He said, that's exactly it. So that was the ultimate compliment Foreman got. Frazier felt that he who beat Ali would not have beaten Foreman, even when he was at his best.
And
he
Jack,
kind of felt.
Jack, let me stop you there. I mean, Frazier was my hero. When I watched the Ali Frazier fight, the guy was in there. He was going to die in that ring. He just kept coming. No matter if he was ahead or not, he was coming all the time. Ali had loads of problems hitting him. But with George Foreman, I was sad. I watched that fight, and I was sad at what happened to Joe Frazier in that fight. I mean, that's my hero going up against George Foreman. As you said, Joe Frazier a lot more known. He's the champion. He's ready to do it. And man, Foreman took it to him. And I mean, he hit him so hard, he raised him up off the ground. I mean, the punching was brutal. And I felt sad and sorry for Frazier there. And I said, holy God, this guy is so strong. Who can stop him? Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, it's good you shared our thoughts, the emotions, because it was a total annihilation of Joe Frazier. Joe Frazier would come back to an extent after, get a couple of good wins, stopping Jerry Quarry, beating Joe Butler, having 2 really top-of-the-line fights with Ali, even though Frazier lost the second fight on a very competitive decision, and the third fight, the Thriller Manila, is arguably, the greatest action-packed heavyweight fight of all time. We could argue that back and forth, of course. But Foreman would, after beating Frazier, he'd make 2 title defenses, knock out a fighter, Joe Roman, in the round, and then knock out Ken Norton in 2 rounds. The same Ken Norton who had 2 life and death fights with Ali, splitting 1-1. So now he's fighting Muhammad Ali in Zaire. And the thought was, look, Foreman knocked out Frazier in 2 rounds. He knocked out Norton in 2 rounds. And Ali was life and death with Norton in 4 fights. He split them 2-2, and even his 2 victories were close fights. So the thought was based on comparisons, of how they did, the Frazier, Ali Norton thing, that Foreman was going to, knock Ali out, that Ali just couldn't hold him off. But that there was the rope-a-dope. Ali was more experienced. Foreman expended energy. He knocks out Foreman in 8 rounds in a great upset, a great performance. And when you suffer a loss like that, sometimes you're not the same, because Foreman was thought of as being invincible. He is unbeatable. And when you're thought of as being unbeatable and you get beat, it does something to your head coming back. So then Foreman comes back after. Yeah.
Well, Jack, I'd stop you there, because this is really I watched the fight from beginning to end, and the what Ali would do, and he did it against Frazier too, is he would get the crowds behind him. He went to Frazier's gym, and here he goes, and he's in Africa, and he's getting all these people chanting Ali, Ali. I mean, he's got the whole country of Africa, or the continent of Africa, almost behind him. And I want to ask you this. I always thought this, Jack. Did they place this fight in Africa on purpose because they knew that maybe Foreman would burn himself out? The way Foreman fought, was all, he just came. It was that kind of in the plan. I mean, they didn't fight in a cool arena somewhere where Foreman wouldn't have sweated and got tired, and maybe he would have lasted longer or whatever. Do you think that was part of the plan when Don King set this up, that they would fight in Africa where it's like 150 degrees?
No, not at all. Not at all. Because Don King was also promoting Foreman. Okay. And it was in his interest just as much, that Foreman win as Ali win. Okay. Don King was gaining nothing from an Ali victory. Maybe he was even gaining a little more Foreman won as far as control went.
Gotcha.
And the reason it wound up in Zaire, because they paid each guy $5 million, which was, Don King was able to pay each guy $5 million. Because in Zaire, the president Mobutu at the time felt it would put Zaire on the map, right. Which, it did to an extent. We're talking about Zaire now, from the time the fight took place in 1974. What people forget, the fight when they went Zaire was delayed. Foreman got cut in training. He caught an elbow, to the eye, and he got cut, and he wanted to go home. He didn't like it in Zaire, but they wouldn't let him go home because they correctly figured he's not coming back to Zaire once he's in the United States. Yeah, he'll reschedule a fight for probably Los Angeles, here, there. But the crowd getting behind Ali, Ali knew how to manipulate the race narrative, get people on his side, because Ali had this tremendous sense of humor. Where people would be attracted to him. And Foreman didn't do himself any favors. As soon as he got to Zaire, he gets off the plane with his dog, a German Shepherd on the leash, and not known to Foreman at the time. And we'd learn later, the German Shepherd would be the dog that the police would use to keep the population in line with their clubs.
Wow.
And Big George is getting off with the German Shepherd.
That's a nugget. I forgot that.
It didn't endear him to people now.
I forgot that, Jack. I forgot all about that. I remember now them saying that. I forgot all about that. That's right. That's crazy. Yeah. Wow. Now, the fight itself, Jack, right? It looked like Ali fought very defensive. The rope-a-dope, the grab, the hold. He throw a couple shots, hold him, try to wear him down. And I know Foreman caught him once. One time he caught him, he kind of made him a little dizzy. Ali doesn't get credit for his chin. He really doesn't. Yeah. He gets credit for dancing, jabbing, moving. I mean, counter punching, all that stuff. But he really doesn't get a lot of credit for his chin. He went up against some big punchers. I mean, you go Liston, Frazier, Foreman, Ernie Shavers.
I think he gets credit now. No, he gets the credit now, Matt. What people forget about the Foreman fight, that's not where Ali introduced the rope-a-dope, but that's
Right.
the perception.
Right.
He introduced it really in the first Joe Frazier fight.
Right.
But the difference is Frazier didn't burn out the way Foreman did, didn't tire out. Frazier fought the whole way through. He fought through the rope-a-dope. And where Ali would look to then flurry and steal rounds, he couldn't do it quite the same way with Frazier. But Foreman, as the rounds went by, he'd be getting more tired. There wouldn't be as much on his punches. And Foreman had no real strategy against Ali beyond just knocking him out. Foreman thought he'd throw the kitchen sink at Ali, keep punching, and Ali couldn't withstand that attack. And once Ali withstood that attack, Foreman later would make a joke about it. He said, I used my money up early. It's like you have a bunch of money and you're going shopping and you're just spending recklessly, and now you need essentials, and you don't quite have the same money. But after Zaire, Foreman was so devastated by the loss. What he did to try to get his image back of being invincible, he took on 5 men in the same night. Now, one after the other, Foreman against the 5, but it turned out to be a fiasco, the whole thing. Ali was at ringside making fun of him. And then later, Foreman would get a couple of good wins, would beat Frazier in a rematch, where he was in good shape out on Long Island at the Nassau, County Coliseum. But then he ran into Jimmy Young, a slick boxing fight in Puerto Rico. Very hot day. Foreman hurt Young in the 7th round. But by the end of the fight, he was so badly dehydrated. And later he says in the dressing room, he kind of passed out. And he saw higher powers that brought him back to life. And then he decided to retire, and he was out of the ring for 10 years.
Before you go to that, Jack, why? I've asked this question on different shows, but I'm doing it here in the Sports Memory Show. Why was there never a rematch between Foreman and Ali?
It never aligned. It's not that Ali ducked it. It never quite aligned. Had he beaten Jimmy Young, his name would have been out there first and foremost. It would have happened. But like a year went by before Foreman fought again. If you want a rematch, you kind of have to force the issue.
Right.
You kind of have to. And Foreman was on the verge of forcing the issue because he did beat Frazier in their rematch. They fought. No title was on the line. Had he beaten Jimmy Young, there would have been a certain pressure on Ali to have the rematch. And would Ali have had it again? I gotta believe he would have.
Yeah.
But Ali wanted for him to have a Foreman rematch. Ali proposed this after Ali fought Norton for the 3rd time. This was after beating Foreman. Ali won a very disputed decision. And after 3 fights with Norton, Ali didn't want to fight Norton anymore because Norton was an absolute nightmare for Ali. So Ali said to Foreman, okay, you fight Norton, you beat him, then I'm going to give you a rematch. You fight Norton again. Norton didn't want any part of Foreman because Foreman was a nightmare for Norton. But Ali figured if Foreman knocks Norton out, he gets him out of the way. No one's bothering Ali about a 4th fight for Norton, at least for a while. And by that time, Ali figured he'd be retired. So Ali wanted Foreman to be his policeman for Norton. And then he could take on Norton because Norton style-wise would have been less of a problem for Ali, he figured, if he fought Foreman again. But so Foreman retires after the Jimmy Young fight. He comes back 10 years later. He's running a youth center in Houston. They turn off the electricity. He can't pay the bills. So he decides he's going to be heavyweight champion of the world again. And we laugh at that. A 10-year layoff. He wasn't the same George Foreman as before, but he was, as far as physically, but he was more poised, smarter, more in control in the ring. And his first fight, the heavyweight title, he gives Evander Holyfield a really good fight, but loses a decision. And then he gets his chance with Michael Moore at the age of 45. to fight for the heavyweight title. Mora has beaten Holyfield. And Foreman is getting beaten badly, terribly, but he's so poised. He hangs in there. And Mora didn't have the greatest chin, and he knocks him out in the 10th round. One of the more inspiring comebacks in sports history, which was good for Foreman, but bad in general, because then older fighters want to use Foreman as an example. And Foreman was more of an aberration than reality, you know. But Foreman, and then he has the George Foreman grilling machine. Let me ask James, what do you think, James? Most people in public, do they know him more for George Foreman, the fighter, the George Foreman grilling machine, or what?
More than likely the grill man. Yeah. But I mean, I myself, I'm old enough to have seen the history of George Foreman and watched some of the later fights. But yes, I think more people are more enamored with who the personality is versus who that guy was way back in the 70s, man. I for me, I'm a historian, so watching his fights, particularly the fight against Evander Holyfield, that prompted me to go back and watch a lot of those old fights you're talking about. And so, like, wow, it's like this guy was powerful. I didn't even know. I was a kid. I grew up watching Sanford and Son. I didn't know that was him that was on there on Sanford and Son. And acted how big of a boxer he was at one time. And so, I would think more people don't even nowadays. More people don't even know the guy with the grill now. So
well,
most people don't even know who George Foreman is.
James. The first coming of George Foreman was a very moody guy. The second coming, he reinvented himself to be lovable, would make jokes, you know, talk about how many hamburgers he was eating and the whole bit. There was some suspicion. Was that the real George Foreman, the real friendly guy, or was it all a front? I think he wanted to be that guy, the friendly guy, and was really trying. And I got a handwritten letter from George Foreman. He wrote me a letter somewhere because his longtime publicist, Bill Kaplan, was being honored by the Boxing Writers Association of America. And I tried to get Foreman to come to Las Vegas to present to his guy. He didn't do it, but he made a nice donation on his own out of nowhere to the affair. And he sent me a nice handwritten note that, you know, in general, because I got a little personal when I contacted him, saying the first professional boxing show I ever went to, he was the main event. Yeah. So he responded nicely, and he's been a credit, I think, to the sport, and he's been very likable. And they had a movie on him that came out a couple of years ago called Big George, which basically is saying what I'm saying. You know, it was the type of movie where everyone knows the story.
Right.
But, you know, you watch it anyway.
You know what I loved about Foreman was Foreman would step away from you, and when he would throw a shot, he put his whole. I mean, I mean, we talk about some of the great heavyweight champions. I think George Foreman could be in the top 10. I think you could put him in there, and arguably,
a lot of people do. A lot of people do.
I mean, he would put his whole. I mean. I mean, defensively, I don't know. He wasn't that good, Jack. His hands were down a lot. He was just coming in to pitch you as hard as he could at every shot. Even when he got older, he was jabbing Michael Moore. Michael Moore was going back with a jab. I mean, the guy was just strong. I mean, he didn't look good when he got older. He didn't look in shape. But my God, that dude, if he hit you, you're feeling it. Even his jabs were just dangerous.
Well, the great Emmanuel Stewart, the late great Emmanuel Stewart, the great trainer, you know, one of the sharpest boxing minds I've ever come across. He said the two strongest heavyweights ever were Lennox Lewis and George Foreman. And that's a very flattering thing because he trained Lennox Lewis. He was with him all the time. He didn't train George Foreman. Yeah. And the idea he put Foreman right next to his guy. Yeah. It's always the ultimate compliment when a great trainer, you know, compares another fighter to his guy, someone he didn't train. I remember Yank Durham, who trained Joe Frazier, was there when Frazier, right before he beat Ali, was Howard Cosell asked Yank Durham, eventually, when you think Frazier is going to be rated amongst the great heavyweights? And Yank Durham said, I think Joe, when all is said and done, is going to be the second greatest heavyweight of all time behind Joe Louis. And Yank Durham had no association with Joe Louis, but it just shows you a certain reverence, you sometimes have to others.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Great job, Jack. Great job, James, too. I'm going to talk about the most successful football team in the 1970s. We all remember Pittsburgh Steelers winning, a few Super Bowls, the Raiders. But really the most successful, just in wins, was the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys between 70 and 79 had 105 wins and 39 losses. Miami right behind them with a tie. So Miami, of course, with their great seasons, they had their, their perfect season. The year they won, they really had a better team the year after that. And under Don Shula, of course, which Tom Landry was always seemed to be chasing as the most wins. But the Dallas Cowboys, I mean, they won a couple of Super Bowls. They went in 1970, they lost to the Colts. They went back, they won a couple, and they lost a couple to of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers in that decade. So they were always winning championships. In fact, they won like 10 championships between those years. They were always playing the Minnesota Vikings, and either the Vikings went or they went national and FC during that time frame. But they were very successful in a lot of different ways. And the main reason for that, of course, was Tom Landry and their GM. And I'm going to try and Gil Brandt, thank you. And later on, Tex Schramm. I mean, these guys actually had computers for the draft. They're the first teams that ever drafted, put their information in computers to make their draft picks. So they were ahead of the game there. Tom Landry and his innovative defenses were unbelievable. He brought he was the first one to come up with the four-man rush or four-man front. He brought that from the Giants to Dallas and then tweaked it even a little bit more. He came up with the flex defense. And the flex defense was moving a lineman off the line of scrimmage, sort of like today's 3-4. Randy White was the main man he used to move. He was a little bit smaller, quicker, and he played almost like a middle linebacker, a fourth middle linebacker. He played the run that way. So he was always coming up with different defensive formations, the dime package. They used to have a nickel where they were bringing an extra defensive back. He brought in another back and played him at safety. A lot of that was Bill Bates, played safety during that time for the Dallas Cowboys, and he actually had 6 defensive backs in the game at one time, sometimes 7 on passing downs. First one to really bring in motion on offense. We think about Tom Landry's defense. He had the players go resetting, shifting, putting them in motion to try to confuse the defenses. And he also brought back the shotgun, which they use today. Tom Landry is responsible for a lot of things we have today that we don't realize. And his Dallas Cowboys, I mean, some of the greatest players in history, right? Roger Staubach, Tony Dorsett. I mentioned Randy White, and you go back a little farther to Don Meredith and Mr. Cowboy himself, and of course I can't think of his name. Bob Lilly. I mean, they had some of the greatest defensive, offensive players. There were Bob Hayes and Mel Renfro.
Figured out Eddie Perkins, a running back. I mean,
thank you. I mean, yes, yeah. I mean, this team was talented. And the 2 Super Bowls against the Steelers are one of the most, I think, one of the most exciting Super Bowls. If you go back and watch, Pittsburgh didn't beat them by much, but Pittsburgh had a great defense and a couple great receivers to go along with Terry Bradshaw. Franco Harris wasn't no joke either, right? Very evenly matched games where Dallas had a chance to win the Super Bowls. So if you ever get a chance, go back and watch those 2 Super Bowls. They were tremendous. Marketing-wise, successful, one of the most successful teams in history. First ones to take cheerleaders, have their own cheerleading squad, go across the world as ministers for the Dallas Cowboys. Everybody knew the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. They were famous worldwide. You talk about playing later. They came in and gave us a second Thanksgiving game because they playing out there in the Southwest. They had a later game, so they became traditionally the second game on Thanksgiving behind the Detroit Lions. Then of course the 4:00 games. A lot of people remember growing up when I think it was at the time it was either CB. It wasn't Fox, Jack. What was it? Fox It wasn't Fox back then.
Well, CBS and NBC telecast again, but CBS was the NFL games, and NBC started AFL, and then they were more AFC. Yeah.
Right.
My question is this what prompted them to propel them as America's team, the moniker, to get the
exactly. It was part of the big reason.
I think it was the Glitz. That's a great question. What set them off as America's team, the label? There was something about the glitz of the Cowboys, even though they weren't in LA or New York. And don't get me wrong, Dallas is a big city, a great city. I think the Dallas Cowgirls contributed to it. They took the initiative as far as cheerleaders went, and they had charismatic players. But actually, Mac, I think the Steelers, from a football perspective, strictly were the team of the 70s because they won 4 Super Bowls to the Cowboys.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah, so the Steelers really were the team of the 70s.
We're talking about pure records, and I think the last Super Bowl the Steelers won was 1980 against the Rams. So it might have been a 79-80 season that they beat the Rams with not Vinny Testaverde. I'm trying to remember the guy's name, number 15. I can see his Vin something. I can't remember his name.
Ferragamo.
But
the game may have taken place in January 1980, but was the 1979 season. I would think it would have been. I don't remember when that. We'd have to look the dates up.
It was 19, but it was my chance to split a hair with you. Anyway, I knew I would come back. So anyway,
but I just want to say,
the point is, you were right with the cheerleaders, but that 4:00 game, I just talked to Robert Butler, and states that didn't have teams, and there were a lot of them back then. Not everybody had an NFL franchise. They saw the Dallas Cowboys every week. So the people on the East Coast that didn't have teams, like Robert Butler, who was living in Tennessee, or somebody that was living in Kentucky, or somebody, in Georgia or whatever, that didn't have a football team, they adopted them. Maine or whatever at the time. These guys saw the Dallas Cowboys every week. So as Robert told me, eventually we get the Titans, but Dallas was my favorite team because that's all I saw. I didn't see anything that was local that interests me. And I think, James, you're right. Jack is 100% right. They became a worldwide spectacle because of the cheerleaders. The cheerleaders were going overseas. And I think that made them America's team, the star, a cowboy. You think about the United States, they talk about John Wayne. Even over today, they talk about that, the Westerns. I think all that contributed to the Dallas Cowboys becoming America's team just because of being televised Thanksgiving, 4:00, cheerleaders, and, of course, being a cowboy. I mean, that's, again, talked about worldwide. But an incredible job marketing. Total wins, Dallas has it. Just beyond Miami. And I agree, Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, the Raiders were there. The Dolphins were there. Pittsburgh just had more Super Bowls. But what games they were. And the AFC, and Jack knows this as well I do, during the 70s, the AFC dominated the NFC. I mean, if you look back at the 70s, the Steelers, the Raiders, the Dolphins, they all were dominating teams in the NFC. The only NFC team that won in the 70s, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jack, I think was the Dallas Cowboys.
Well,
Minnesota
won a couple of Super Bowls. The Cowboys, you think of all the near misses. They were never thought of as being a dynasty because they couldn't quite get there. They lose 2 tight games to the Green Bay Packers that went down to the wire to see who goes to Super Bowls 1 and 2. And had the Cowboys won instead of the Packers, they absolutely would have won Super Bowls 1 and 2. And think of the perception, all the talk about Vince Lombardi and the Packer dynasty wouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
Tom Landry comes barely short, and then later on they ran into the great Steeler teams, the 2 Super Bowls they lost to them. Those were legendary Steeler teams. And then they lose to the 49ers on Joe Montana's throw to Dwight Clark. I mean, the near misses, had they won those games, just imagine. Then they go on to win Super Bowls, and then just think what we would have thought of them. But they won 2 Super Bowls. Yeah.
It might have been the Tom Landry Trophy. It might have been the Tom Landry Trophy. Good.
Maybe people took to them, was it the location in part? being in Dallas, because the Packers were never America's team, maybe because they were located in cold, frigid Green Bay. I don't know what the answer is to that. And maybe it was they were just charismatic, the Cowboys. Like you said, with the flex defense, their players were charismatic. Too Tall Jones,
Yes.
Bullet Bob Hayes, they had charisma to add on to the
Hollywood Henderson.
Hollywood Henderson.
Yeah,
great.
I mean these are names that just come off the top of your head, especially Too Tall Jones and I mean I think what it was they just went up against the Steelers, which, like I said, if they won those 2 Super Bowls, I think they lost 27-21. It was always a 1-score game. Imagine if they won those games. I mean, they
had a holdout. They had a holdout. The player died a couple of months ago, Dwayne Thomas. Okay, yes. He was a great running back during their Super Bowl victory over Denver. In the 1970s. Now he didn't like the amount he was getting paid. So at the time, he decided how he was going to handle his holdout. He was going to report to camp. He was going to play, but he wasn't going to talk to anyone. So he gave everyone this silent treatment. I think other players, coaches, whatever. But, by all reports, he was a good person. But that's how, he handled things, at the time.
And I think Chuck Howley just got, by the veterans team, I think he just got put in the Hall of Fame, if I'm not
great linebacker, yeah.
If I'm not wrong. So I mean, again, the only I'm trying to think if there was any other NFC team that won Super Bowl during the 70s. I can't think of one. I really can't.
But at that time in the 70s, Mac, in actuality, in the early 70s, they changed the format. There was no longer the AFL. So the Cleveland Browns, the Pittsburgh Steelers,
yes,
they went into the AFC.
That's true.
So you didn't have the AFL NFL dynamic anymore. We lost something with that. I wish they would have kind of kept it going. But, teams transitioned to another league.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the expansion. The AFL kind of forced that, Jack, right? I think they forced because they said, well, if you're not going to let us come into your league, we'll form our own. And then all of a sudden they start getting more popular and taking the draft picks. And the NFL at that time said, okay, we give in. You guys, we can do this.
They absorbed the team. They absorbed the AFL team. So they were all the NFL, but there was no longer an AFL. They would just be called AFC, NFC. Kind of as we know it today. Interleague play, it happens in all sports, even baseball. Yeah. There's no longer American League, National League pride because of interleague play. Teams play one another all the time. So you don't have that mystique that you used to have. Do you miss that?
I mean, James, would you like that? Would you like that a team in the AFC doesn't play a team in the NFC till the Super Bowl? I mean, would that be
not at all?
You wouldn't like that. You wouldn't like that.
You would. I mean, I would want to at least test the waters and see what I'm going up against. How do you set a barometer of what? I mean, especially if a specific conference is more dominant. If I'm a good team in the NFC, if particularly, and I want to go up against someone like the Chiefs, I want to at least test them out early on to see where we are. So we can say, okay, this is what we got to work on. No, I definitely would want to play them prior to. I wouldn't want to not play them and then make them up. I mean, that happens in college, though. It happens all the time in college. Yes. You have a team that can set themselves up and practice and scout and beat and upset a team. Like Clemson versus Alabama. That kind of thing. So.
And you also see the opposite, where the team does not play anybody tough and they go to championship and get beat 55-0, right? So I get that. But, I do kind of miss the anticipation of never, ever, this one league against the other. It builds up the anticipation to me at the end. I kind of miss that, but I do get what you're saying. So coming to the end of the show, folks, thanks for tuning in and checking us out. We always have a blast doing this. Tomorrow, the big football show. Got a lot of football to cover tomorrow, folks. So join us at 8 a.m. and stay tuned to the Roku channel all day today. You'll get sports, whether it's shows or interviews. You'll have a bunch of stuff to look at. Thanks for tuning in and have a great Saturday, folks. Stay at it.